Thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar on festival lighting control, the view from both ends of the snake, presented by Robin Seefeldt. My name is Laura Lawrence and I'm the Global Marketing Director at Harman. Just a few things before we get started. Everyone on the call is muted to keep down noise levels during the webinar. However, there is a chat function where you can submit questions to the presenter and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible. This webinar is also being recorded and the link will be made available a few days after this presentation. We do have a number of other webinars taking place over the next few months for audio, lighting, video, and control, and we'd like to encourage you to take a look at the different webinars in our Learning Session Workshop Series on pro.harman.com, as well as visiting Harman Professional University to see our many on-demand and certification courses that are available to you for free. And now I'd like to introduce you to Robin Seefeldt, the presenter for today's webinar. Robin has been working in lighting production for 16 years and has been a touring lighting director since 2010. Robin has toured and been a part of festivals on 5 continents, in addition to working as a production electrician for festival main stages in the United States. And I'm going to pass the mic over to you, Robin.
Thanks, Laura. Move one of these. All right, hi everyone. Welcome to the webinar, and thanks to Harman and Martin Lighting for this opportunity to share with you all today. As Laura said, I'm Robin, and I'm a lighting director and programmer for concerts, tours, festivals, and other events. I worked on my first large-scale music festival as a production electrician back in 2008, and I began touring as a lighting director, as you said, in 2010. I studied theater technology in college, and I got my start in the concert lighting industry, working at a lighting rental shop and also as a local stagehand. I pushed a lot of road cases, coiled a lot of cables, and talked to people who quickly became colleagues and friends. Networking like this gave me the chance to learn about the touring industry from working professionals, and that helped me get some of my first jobs on the road. I feel fortunate to have worked for many talented artists performing at music festivals around the world. No matter where a festival is located, there are 2 people in important roles that depend on each other to produce a successful lighting show. These roles are the guest LD and the lead production electrician. So the guest LD is the lighting director who travels with an artist, and they're responsible for operating the lighting console during the artist's performance at a festival. And the lead production electrician, they're responsible for laying out the festival lighting system, and he or she can also be known as the festival master electrician, festival ME, or the lighting crew chief. When the lead production electrician and the guest LD communicate with each other before the festival, a lot of challenges can be solved ahead of time. And maintaining that communication throughout the festival process, that's a big part of having a successful show. Before I go any further, though, I do want to briefly explain 3 terms that I'll be talking about a lot. And for anyone who's unfamiliar, the first term is FOH, and the next is dimmer beach, and after that is the snake. So FOH stands for front of house. So this is where the control area for various stage elements are located. And as you can see in this photo, it can get pretty crowded. There's usually multiple lighting consoles, audio consoles, cameras, video controllers, and all kinds of things out there. Oftentimes, VIP guests such as family members of the artist might show up, and they might stay and watch the show from front of house. So especially given that, festivals should always assign dedicated security staff to front of house. So for both guest LDs and festival MEs, they should always just be aware and speak up if you don't see security posted at front of house, because that's really important for everyone's safety. All right, and dimmer beach. Dimmer beach is the area backstage where control and power distribution racks for a lighting system are located. So usually it gets built on stage right. Sometimes it gets built underneath the stage. Particularly at festivals, this way there's more room on the stage floor because there's always a lot of moving parts and extra equipment coming in. So if dimmer beach is underneath the stage, that'll just make things origin of the phrase dimmer beach. One is a reference to early 20th century dimmers, and they were used saltwater in the mechanics pit as part of a variable resistor for electric current. And the other is the phrase, the beach is where the breakers are, and no one knows who said that first. I used to say when I was younger that I always wanted to work at a beach someday. I just never imagined it would be this kind of beach. All right, the snake, what is that? The snake is a group of cables that run between front of house and dimmer beach. They provide the vital link between control devices and other equipment. The snake is also sometimes referred to as the umbilical, the front of house loom, front of house run, things like that. Other departments also use their own snake lines, but those should be run in separate groups from the lighting snake, because when they get to the stage, they're going to be going to different places, controlling different things. The cables typically included in a lighting snake tend to be power cables and control cables. And the control cables, those can vary from Cat5 cables to 5-pin DMX cables. They might even be a fiber optic network line. So it's important for the guest LD and the festival ME to discuss this ahead of time, as every show has different needs, and both people need to be prepared for what's going to be there on site and how it's all going to connect together. Ideally, a spare cable will also be included for each active cable in the snake, just in case. And along those lines, you should always protect your snake from harm, preferably with cable ramps and barricades. This photo is a great example. You can see there's barricades on either side, protected with ramps, so hopefully, nothing's going to happen to it. So, because if these snake cables get damaged during the show, it's possible that could cause the entire performance to just come to a complete halt until the issue can be resolved. So, very, very important part of the lighting control system, and an important link between front of house and dimmer beach. So the guest LD at front of house is the one responsible for sending information down the snake, but the festival ME is responsible for then making sure that that information gets distributed correctly once it reaches dimmer beach. So, all right, next we'll talk about some of the initial communications that happen prior to a festival. So this is all stuff that needs to happen before anyone even gets to site. So first, two important documents will be exchanged between the festival production team and the artist production team. So the first document is the festival tech packet, and that gets sent out by the festival production team to each artist production manager. So everyone coming to the Plays Out Festival, each of their production managers get this. The second document is the artist production writer. So each artist production manager will have their own production writer, and that gets sent to the festival team. So I'll talk a little more about the contents of these documents in a minute. But basically, the point here is after these documents get exchanged, there's negotiations that happen between the artist production managers and the festival management team, and they negotiate over what equipment the festival will be providing and paying for, and what the artists will be providing and paying for. During these negotiations, this is when both the festival ME and the guest LD should be consulted about things like substituting different lighting fixtures, where the lights can be placed on stage, anything else that can affect the lighting for their show. Because they're the ones that are going to understand the technical challenges and whether or not something's an acceptable substitution, things like that. Once both parties have resolved any of the changes, additions, substitutions, etc. to the festival, once all that's been done, then the festival ME and the guest LD can really get into discussing those technical details. One thing that's important for both festival MEs and guest LDs to understand is that any changes after this point, like they all need to be approved by the artist production manager and by the festival management team, especially if it's a change that could affect the budget or the schedule. All right. So next, let's compare some things that are usually included in the festival tech packet and then some things in the artist writer. So keep in mind this list is not a complete list because every festival and every artist has a unique situation. So the festival tech packet, that'll have a contacts list, it'll have a lighting plot and a DMX patch for the festival, stage specifications, rigging specifications, audio info, video info, schedules, things like the dressing room info, catering info, and the festival lineup. Festival lineup is always good to know, especially because festivals can be kind of like summer camp. So if you see somebody else on the lineup and you know people on the crew for that artist, like, and they're playing on the same day as you or something like that, like, you know, you'd be like, oh, this person might be there, and it's always fun. So on the artist production writer, they will also have a contacts list. They'll have, you know, their standard lighting plots that they're been touring with, a stage plot that will show like where band positions are on stage and music instruments, things like that. Any audio and video needs, and they'll also include information about any additional equipment that the artist might have, scenery, props, wardrobe, stuff like that. They'll have the number of follow spots required if they're using them, and comm stations needed for those operators. Any special effects needed if they have stuff like that. And then also the artist writer usually includes the number of local personnel that are required to assist the tour crew on site. So the festival ME should definitely be consulted by the festival production management team before the tech packet gets distributed. That way they can make sure the information about the festival lighting system is accurate before the guest LD sees it. The festival tech packet is often the guest LD's first glimpse of what they can expect to see on site. And how organized this is a good predictor of how organized or not the festival production could be when they arrive. So putting some effort into that is good. Likewise, the guest LD should also check the lighting related information that's being distributed in the artist production writer. Again, goes both ways. So remember, accurate information that's shared ahead of time, ahead of the festival, will save everybody a lot of time and a lot of emails. So now that we've talked about the initial communication process, I'm going to go talk more in depth about the roles of the festival ME and the guest LD. I'll explain what they do or what they can do before and during a festival, and in order for everybody to have a better festival experience. Part of my inspiration for doing this webinar, and was something that I think is often taken for granted, is how these roles are like the missing pieces of the puzzle to each other. The festival ME has spent many, many hours working with the festival lighting plot and getting all of this stuff together for the festival, but the festival ME has not seen any of the individual performances that are going to happen on their stage. So the guest LDs, on the other hand, they've spent many, many hours working with their artists and working with their artist show. They've seen that show over and over and over, but they have never worked on this particular lighting festival plot before. So it's only after the two of these people come together at a festival site that that festival lighting system is truly complete. And yes, those are both pictures of me about 9 years apart. So first, let's talk about the view from Zimmer Beach. So I'll discuss what the lead production electrician's role is and what they need to know about the festival lighting plot. I'll share some tips for creating the festival lighting patch, and then we'll talk about preparing for load-in, what to do when the guest LD arrives, and what to do during the show. So the lead production electrician is responsible for managing the layout and the cable distribution of a festival lighting system. So they have to figure out everything, what cables are going to what lights where, how they're getting there, where things are getting connected and plugged in, all of that. They're involved very early in the design process and stay on through until the end of the festival. So, because again, as the design process goes on and things change, they also need to be included in that. He or she also manages teams of other production electricians and local stagehands. So and they're setting everything up, and all the way through until the loadout. They can also be known as the Festival Master Electrician, the Festival ME, or just ME, or the Lighting Crew Chief. Sometimes they get hired directly by the festival, sometimes they're hired through the lighting equipment vendor for the festival. When it comes to the design of a festival lighting plot, it's helpful for the festival ME to understand where it came from. So it might simply be a copy of the lighting design for the head lighting artist, if it's, particularly if it's only a one-day festival, or it might be a hybrid of lighting plots for multiple artists. You might look at the plots for the headliners for both nights and try to sort of make something that will work for both of them. It might also be an original design created for the festival. So they might hire a production designer who creates this beautiful design for the festival, and everyone coming to it has to just adapt to it. So the first thing for the ME to consider is how they're going to lay out the lighting control and power distribution system to support this festival lighting design. And they also need to calculate the total amount of control channels needed and all the power requirements of the design. This will inform, is there power enough on site? Is there, are generators going to need to be brought in? And the ME has to ask, can this design be realized and can it be done safely? So the next thing the ME has to think about is logistics. How is this lighting plot going to change and move throughout the day, depending on which artist is performing on stage? So maybe it will move a lot, maybe it will move once, maybe it won't move at all. Maybe you'll get lucky and it loads in and it doesn't move again until it loads out, but that's pretty unlikely. There's likely going to be more than one artist per stage, per day, all with different needs. So the ME needs to have creative thinking skills, stay flexible, and stay organized. So one of the best places to start organizing is with the fixture ID numbers. So the fixture ID number is the number that everyone will use to reference a particular fixture in this festival lighting system. So nearly all devices that have a fixture ID will be lights, but they can also reference other DMX-controlled devices in the system, such as like a haze or fog machine. Most of the time, the festival lighting designer, like whoever's created the lighting plot, that person will usually assign the fixture ID numbers when they create the plot. However, the ME needs to make sure that they double-check that for mistakes, and they also need to make sure that the fixture ID numbers were organized in a way that's going to be easy for everybody to understand. They might also need to add in new fixture numbers for any additional lighting equipment that's being brought in to supplement an artist's performance, because the festival designer, they may or may not know anything about that stuff. So here's an example of a basic festival lighting plot using an organized method for fixture ID numbers. Look at that. So the first thing I want to point out is that each type of fixture has been assigned a number within a hundreds range. So on this example, the Martin Mac Viper profiles are all in the 100 range, and the Martin Mac Quantum washes are all in the 200 range, so on. And you'll see a different range for each type. The next thing I want to point out is where the fixture IDs are beginning on the horizontal trusses. So the lowest number is starting in the upstage right corner and then counts across from stage right to stage left, and then we just move on to the next truss moving down stage. So the next thing that I want to point out is there's a smaller number range assigned per fixture type and per truss. And usually this can be separated by tens. If you have more than 10 of one type of fixture on a truss, then you might separate it by 20s. But basically using this method, if the guest tells the ME or vice versa that, hey, fixture number 226 isn't working correctly, something's wrong, ME can already know exactly where it is, you know, just by that number. They already know it's a wash light. They already know it's on the downstage truss. They already know it's on stage left. And they can troubleshoot the problem much more quickly that way. Hey, but what if there's lights on the side of the stage? These can be organized a little differently. So yeah, people will do this differently, but my preferred way is to assign fixture numbers to side lights by doing one range for stage right and another range for stage left. And I put the lowest number at the downstage position, and then I count upstage from there. And again, I can hear the number, look at it, something, you know, I know right away what kind of fixture it is. I know whether it's downstage, I know whether it's upstage, and it's just easier to find things that way. And again, depending on festival lighting design, like there could be trusses and all kinds of other configurations. There might be towers, there might be circles, even triangles. However the fixture IDs get assigned, just stay consistent with the method and try not to change them once that lighting plot has been sent out to the guest LDs. So, one other note about the plot, it's really useful to include a fixture key. That's that box in the upper left there. So that's going to list all of the different kinds of lights that are on the plot. It's also going to include the fixture mode settings because many different lighting fixtures, they have different mode settings you can put them in, and that's going to determine how they function. So putting this on the festival plot that gets sent out with the tech packet, like this is really important because then everyone knows what kind of lights will be at the festival and how they're going to function. All right. Every fixture that's controlled by DMX will require a DMX address assigned to it so that the correct data gets sent to the correct fixture. The lead production electrician is responsible for assigning these DMX addresses to each fixture and then compiling this information into a spreadsheet, and this spreadsheet will be referred to as the patch sheet or simply the patch. The lead production electrician is responsible for creating the patch because, as I talked before, he or she also has to plan the cable layouts for the data and the power cables. So the way in which these get laid out and how that's going to make sense, a lot of that will have an impact on how things can be addressed. So that is why it's their job. So the guest LD is not responsible for this part of the process. Again, there might be multiple guest LDs coming to a festival, and it would be chaos if the guest LDs if all of them were trying to tell the ME how to do this. So one person. And another reason that this is the lead production electrician's responsibility is because they know the bigger picture of the festival too. They know what's changing between artists day to day, and then so they need to be able to manage that. The one thing that a guest LD can do though is they can request a particular fixture mode setting if there's a certain function that they need from those lights for their show. That's what they do. So here's an example of a well-organized patch sheet. So you'll notice there's columns here for the fixture ID, for the fixture type, for the location, the DMX address, and for the fixture mode. So my preference is to organize these by the location and then by the fixture type. So organizing this patch sheet by fixture type, it will also help the guest LDs, as we'll see later. The more organized this patch sheet is, again, the easier and faster it will be to find any information you need. So I usually start approaching this process though when you've got the lighting plot in front of you and you're starting to assign all your DMX addresses and where do I even start? So I usually kind of approach it similar to the fixture IDs. So I just start up stage right and I just start working my way across and moving down stage, going stage right to stage left, and just always keeping those cable paths in mind because cable management is a huge part of the festival ME's job. Yeah, just thinking about how that's all going to install. And again, think about the loadout. How is it all going to come down at the end of the week when everybody's super tired and you just want to do it fast? So yeah, all good stuff to keep in mind. Another thing that's really good to include on this patch sheet is any control, like networking information, such as the lighting console software version and what kind of consoles are going to be on site, any relevant IP addresses for equipment, you know, depending on what kind of networking protocol your festival is using. It's also a great idea to allow some extra room in the system for any extra DMX channels, in case any equipment gets added at the last minute. Like, you know, you don't want to be like, oh, we can't set up those extra things because I don't have room. Like, yeah, like you need to make sure you've got some space. And bring some spare network equipment because things change fast and they change often. Yeah. So after the festival light plot and the DMX sheet have been completed and all that information has been sent out to everybody, and you know, the negotiations and all that stuff's happened between the artists, between production. So after that's happened, the festival me will spend at least a few days before the festival starts preparing all of the lighting equipment to be installed. So this preparation process usually happens at a lighting vendor's shop. Sometimes maybe equipment will be sent to a different warehouse and prepped there, you know, just whatever the situation is. So during that prep, the festival me will be leading a team of production electricians to help with this whole process. Like it's more work than one person can do. A lot of those production electricians that are working for this preparation process, they will also be on site as well as part of that festival ME's lighting production team on site. So the ME needs to have a really good plan going into this prep so that all of the lighting equipment gets prepped correctly and it's ready on time to load onto a truck and sent to the festival. So step one of this process is to label everything. So power and data distribution racks, those labels should indicate what part of the system they're powering or controlling, what each breaker is connected to. The connectors of any important cables in the system, those should also be labeled just so they're easily identified whenever you see the ends of them on a truss or, you know, on the ground. You should be able to pick it up and, hey, this is connected to this thing. Like color coding is really useful here as well. If you've got enough different colors of tape and stuff to do that with. Road cases should be labeled. The espresso machine for Denver Beach should be labeled. All the best MEs always bring their own coffee makers to Denver Beach. Lights should be labeled with their fixture IDs and their DMX address. The DMX address and the modes for each of the lighting fixtures should be set at the shop as well. This is something that the festival me and their crew can do. Depending on the shop, you might be able to also have the shop staff do some of that addressing for you while they're prepping and testing the lights, if you have the information prepared and ready to give to them. Doing all of this ahead of time, ahead of the load-in on the festival site, this will save you all so much time when you get to site. Any critical networking components should also be tested and configured at the shop. This includes the lighting consoles, so turn them on, make sure they're all happy and working, and double check the software version, check IP addresses, any other network settings that are relevant to your festival, particularly if you're using ArtNet or another protocol like that. Make sure that's all happy. Before the main festival rig loads in, not before, after the main festival lighting rig loads in, like it's all set up, like there's still going to be multiple mini load-ins basically for each artist, anyone that's bringing in their own lighting elements for their performance. So the festival ME should prepare for these little mini load-ins and preset any lighting equipment for these ahead of time, like whenever possible. So doing that early, that's going to save time on site again, especially during any short changeovers between the artists on stage. Because depending on the festival situation, you could have anywhere from 15 minutes to 30. A really long changeover, you might get 45. But typically, you're going to be lucky to get half an hour between each artist, and it's probably going to be pushing for like 20 minutes if you can. So yeah, presetting all that saves a lot of time. And then the last thing that I want to mention for this part is that the festival me should also know where any spare equipment is located on site, and also how to access it whenever, if it's needed. Probably when it's needed, not if it's needed. But depending on the festival, like if the spare equipment is, you know, if you have to get on a golf cart and go drive and get it, you know, that you got to plan for that. If you're lucky and you've got space, you can keep some of that equipment under the stage, around the stage. Okay, so what to do when the guest LD arrives. So when the guest LD arrives at the festival site, the festival lighting system, that should already be installed, should be tested, ready to go. The first thing that the festival ME needs to do is go introduce themselves and welcome the guest LD to the festival. Remember, guest LDs need to work when it is dark in order to see their lighting in the same conditions as it will be during their show. LDs also have focus position references for any moving lights in their show file, and all of those presets are going to need to be updated for this festival rig. These are going to be positions like downstage center, individual band positions on stage, and just other things like that. So because most festivals happen outdoors, the only time it's going to be dark when the LD can work is going to be at night. And especially when it's a multiple day festival, if this guest LD is coming in on day 2 or 3, they're going to be scheduled to work overnight on the night prior to their artist's performance. So when that guest LD first arrives on site, it might be 1 o'clock in the morning. So remember, at this point, the guest LD and the festival ME, they're probably tired. The guest LD, they might also be jet lagged from traveling to the festival. Like for example, like one time when I was working as a guest LD, we did 3 festivals in 3 different countries in 3 days in Southeast Asia. So that was 3 nights that I spent sleeping on planes in between all of those festivals. And, you know, doing all of the planning and stuff, that we'll talk about that more in a minute, but, you know, the guest LD has multiple festivals probably that they're playing just that week, you know, and they're keeping a lot of different things in their mind. So when they get to your festival as the festival ME, like, just be really patient, and a lot of kindness and patience and compassion just on everybody's part, like, that goes a long way here. So after those initial introductions, you've met each other, you've probably been emailing each other for a couple weeks at this point. So after that, I recommend that the festival ME and the guest LD, they start out on stage and have a conversation about the lighting system there first. And after that, then escort the LD out to front of house. So why? Well, because once you get the guest LD out to front of house and they're all set up there and ready to start programming, they're not going to want to waste time walking back and forth between front of house and the stage. It takes time, it's a long walk usually. So while you're on stage, some things to talk about with the guest LD includes like checking the location of the lighting equipment that's been placed on the stage, making sure if they've got anything there that it's in a good spot, and checking the location of haze or fog machines, whether or not the guest LD is even using them. You know, some artists don't like them, some love them, want to use all of them. You know, note for that too with festivals, again, they're outside. They're going to be, the wind's going to do what the wind's going to do. So a lot of times it's a good idea, if you can, to put one in each corner of the stage. You know, just at least start with that, because then no matter which way the wind goes, you'll be okay. And then discuss with the LD and other departments too, discuss the plan for changeover, what's going to go where, how things are going to move. And then one important thing to do as well is to measure the trim heights of any of the lighting trusses that are above the stage, anything that's flown above the band. LD looks up and is like, oh yeah, they're fine where they are, that's good. Measure them now, that way you can make sure they return to this position later, just in case anything changes between now and the guest LD's part of the show. You might have another guest LD coming in a few hours after this person leaves, and they might want to change stuff, so good to keep track of that. So once you're done on stage, take them out to front of house and make sure they get all set up and they're happy and things are working, they have control of the rig, and the ME should stay out there, you know, until they have full control of the rig, you know, don't just take them out there and abandon them. So, and then if the ME does need to leave front of house though, once they get all set up and they're like, hey, I've got to go back on stage and check on the crew, make sure to just hand the guest LD a local production radio. So they're going to have a radio to their own tour crew, but go ahead and give them a local one. That way they can call the ME if they need help or if there's an issue, lose power, something happens. There you go. So once the guest LD is set up and they're programming and they're working on all their stuff, they're probably going to be there for an hour or 3 at least, hopefully, if they're lucky, you know, it depends on the schedule. But during this time, the festival ME can relax for a little bit, as long as there's not still work going on the stage that they need to be involved in. But if everything's good and the LD is just programming, yeah, just relax, make some coffee, be patient, and take the time to catch up on other tasks. You know, if there's other things you can prepare for the next day, if Dimmer Beach needs tidied up, organizing spare equipment, you know, there's always stuff to do. And it'll help you stay awake as well. And if you're a festival ME who maybe is interested in programming and maybe wants to become a guest LD someday, this is a good moment now. Ask the guest LD if you can observe them while they're at work. So most guest LDs won't mind if you hang out at front of house while they're doing this, especially if you're bringing them a coffee or tea, you know, and just don't interrupt them. Just let them do their thing and just observe, and you can ask them questions later, you know, but that's a good moment. Okay, so showtime. Here we are. All right, changeover went smoothly. Guest LD's ready. Here we go. So the festival ME has 2 options on where to be during the show. So they could stay at front of house and watch from there, you know, and make sure they have a radio connection back to an associate over at Dimmer Beach. Or they could stay at Dimmer Beach and stay on the stage and keep a radio connection to an associate out at front of house. It's really important that somebody from the festival lighting team needs to be in each location at all times during the show, because if something happens at front of house or something happens at the festival or Dimmer Beach, like someone from the festival crew, you know, they should be there. A third option, though, would be for the festival ME to have associates at front of house and at Dimmer Beach, and that would allow him or her to move around freely during the show. So that's also an option. Ultimately, the ME needs to decide what is best for their festival situation, and depending on how things have been configured for that festival, you know, the ease of access between front of house and Dimmer Beach, that's going to be something to consider, and yeah, what are the chances, you know, if there's been equipment that's been acting weird that day, like just know where you should be. Using a comm system between front of house and Dimmer Beach, that can be good as well, like definitely, you know, encourage that, but that should also be used in addition to radios, just in case someone has to move away from their position. No matter where the festival ME decides to stay during the show, he or she needs to pay attention to the entire performance environment, not just the artist performing on stage. So a lot of unexpected things can happen during a live show, and ME must also just be on the lookout for safety issues that could. The guest LD will also be relying on the festival ME to help solve problems if they arise, and to do so calmly without jeopardizing the show or anyone's safety. But remember to have fun too. So despite all the what-if scenarios, like, it's showtime. It's the time to enjoy watching everything come together, and it just makes this magical, unique experience for thousands of audience members, and pretty fun. So that is the view from the festival ME's perspective. So now we're going to take a look at all of this again from the view of the guest LD. So first we're going to start discussing what the guest LD does. And then we'll talk about what information they need from that festival lighting plot, what information they're looking for from that festival lighting patch, and how they handle all of that from their end. And we'll talk about how they prepare for their arrival at the festival site. We'll talk about their workflow once they get to site, and then we'll talk about what they need to do during the show. So the guest LD, they're the lighting director who travels with an artist to a festival, and they're responsible for operating the lighting console during the artist performance. They can also be known as the tour LD. I decided not to use the term tour LD for this because not all festivals happen as part of a tour. The guest LD, they might just be coming in, flying in, doing that festival, flying home, and they're not on a tour necessarily. So, but sometimes they are. Sometimes it's part of a whole run that they're doing. So the guest LD, like they're the lighting director, but they may have also been the lighting designer and or the programmer of the original lighting design for that artist performance. So sometimes that's all the same person, and sometimes it's different. Sometimes there was a different designer and there was a different programmer, and then the lighting director gets hired to take that file and run with it. So regardless of how that happened, the guest LD is responsible for protecting the integrity of that design and for adapting the programming to each festival lighting system that artist is going to be performing at. They're usually hired by the artist production manager, and they might have worked with an artist for many, many years too. So after the guest LD receives a copy of the festival lighting plot from that festival tech packet, the first thing that they must do is to compare the festival's design to their artist's design, and then they need to ask a lot of questions. Are there enough lighting fixtures? Are they located in positions that are going to work for their artist's performance? Are they the same type of lights as what's in their original design? Can any changes be made if something's not working for them? Now is when to find out, not the day you arrive on site. So the guest LD, they should reach out to their production manager right away if they have any questions or concerns about the festival lighting system. So the LD can certainly discuss all of the technical details with the festival ME, but like I said earlier, any changes or additions, those have to be approved by production managers for both the artist and the festival, especially when it affects the budget. So the LD can certainly make requests, make suggestions. The festival ME can put in their input. They can make suggestions as well. But ultimately, it is going to be up to the production manager to negotiate the final outcome with the festival production team. So sometimes a festival lighting system, you'll get lucky. They'll have the exact quantity, type, location of fixtures that the LD wants. Especially if you're with the headlining artist and if that festival design was just trying to recreate that headliner's design, like that's going to be relatively easy for you. But yeah, usually things are going to be a little different somewhere, and the LD just has to find a creative way to make it work. An acceptable compromise can always be found, and the guest LD also needs to remember to just maintain a positive attitude and always keep in mind that their actions and how they're being through this process, all of that is going to be seen as a representative of the artist that they're working for. So it's not, people aren't going to remember that person. They're going to be like, oh, it was so-and-so's LD, and they were really, like this or whatever. Or they're going to be like, oh yeah, those guys are great to work with. You just got to keep that in mind. So on the next slide, we'll take a look at the fixture ID numbers, but from the guest LD's perspective. A guest LD will plan to arrive at a festival with a show file for the lighting console. So this file is going to contain information that was originally programmed for a different lighting system, and that's what he or she is going to be adapting to this festival. So the guest LD's first task is to add in the new components of the festival lighting system to their show file. So they must stay really organized when they do this to avoid confusion between any new festival information and the information that's already in their show file. So fixture ID numbers, this is one of the ways that can help that organization. So most lighting consoles will have some type of interactive worksheet where the guest LD can edit fixture ID numbers. So oftentimes this worksheet is organized by putting different fixture types onto different layers. So remember when we talked earlier about assigning fixture ID numbers on the festival plot based around fixture type? This is, again, where that's helpful to both parties. So once the guest LD has a copy of the festival lighting plot with the fixture IDs on it, you'd be surprised the number of times I've seen plots with no numbers. Anyway, once they get that information, he or she can start organizing this part of their show file and add in all those new lights on new layers. So it's also good practice to name each layer in a way that clearly separates the festival lights from the others that are already in the show file. So, but first, the guest LD also has to make sure that these new fixture IDs coming in to their show don't conflict with their original fixture ID numbers, because everybody needs to have their own unique number. So one method that I use to avoid any of these fixture ID conflicts when I know I'm going into a festival is I duplicate the first digit of my original fixture IDs. So my original 101 becomes 1101, and 201 becomes 2201, so on and so forth. This makes it really easy for me later, because then when I'm typing numbers into the console, I'm just simply typing that first digit twice, and I'm not having to try to transpose to different numbers or try to remember what I changed to what. Like, it's really easy. I also try to avoid assigning my original fixture IDs with a number that's below 101 if I know that I'm taking it to a festival. This way, once all this is done, this guarantees that I have fixture ID numbers 1 through 999 open and available for anything the festival has. And if you're going into a festival situation with more than 999 fixtures in it, congratulations. So other LDs might do this process differently. The goal is just to have an organized plan and just do what works for your situation. So next up, we'll look at the DMX patch, again, from the perspective of the guest LD. So in most lighting consoles, the same interactive worksheet that the fixture ID numbers were assigned in, this is also where the guest LD is going to go to assign the DMX addresses to each of the fixtures that are patched into that file. So once the guest LD has a copy of the patch sheet from the festival me, he or she can begin to patch that DMX and address information for the festival lighting fixtures into their show. So here's an example of the patch on the console. So this worksheet also has other functions on it beyond just assigning the fixture IDs and patching in the DMX addresses. So it's where the guest LD can select the specific type of fixture to be patched and where they can edit various control parameters and default settings. So it's very important for the guest LD to find out from the festival ME exactly what type of lighting fixtures will be at a festival and what modes those lights will be set to, so that they can prepare all of this accurately. Lighting consoles store internal files that are called fixture personalities for different types of lighting fixtures, and these define how those fixtures respond to a DMX signal. So these are also known as fixture profiles or fixture libraries. Whatever you call it, these fixture personalities correspond to the mode settings that got configured on the actual lights back during the shot prep. So guest LDs should always strive to patch their show files ahead of time and make sure the fixture personalities that they have used are the correct ones for the festival. So I cannot emphasize how important all this preparation is. Just getting everything patched ahead of time, getting your show file, everything's numbered how you need it to be numbered, all of that's done. So if all of that gets done correctly, when the guest LD arrives for their overnight programming session and loads their show file onto the console, it shouldn't take more than 10 minutes to get control of the whole festival lighting system. It's a pretty basic festival and there's nothing too crazy. 10 minutes, you should be up and ready to start programming, start focusing, start working. So waiting to patch your show file until you're on site, it'll waste so much time, really valuable time that could be spent on programming updates for the show. So this is a shared responsibility between the festival ME and the guest LD. So the ME, they're responsible for providing accurate information to the LD and making sure they have that information ahead of time, early enough to do the work they need to do. And then the LD has to prepare their show file before they arrive on site. So in addition to preparing their show file, there's a few lists that I recommend that the LD make ahead of their arrival on site. So I recommend making an on-stage checklist of everything to discuss before heading to front of house, a front of house checklist to go through once you get set up at the console, and a fixture cloning list just as a quick reference of the original fixtures in the file, in the show file, and all of the new festival fixtures that information will be cloned to. Cloning is a programming process that is used to copy information from one set of fixtures to another. It's also helpful to have a copy of the festival schedule, as well as any contact information for key people at the festival site. And again, part of making all these lists, remember when you get to site, it might be 1 o'clock in the morning, you might be super jet lagged, it might be your third festival in 3 days in 3 countries. You're very tired. So having some lists like this just so that you're not going to worry you've got something, it's all, just go through your list. Just prepare ahead of time when you're not tired and just go through it. So these are just some examples of stuff that could be on those lists. How and where to keep these lists, that's really just up to the LD. You might have a notebook you keep with you and put these in it, or maybe you just save these into your smartphone. Just so whatever you decide to do, whatever works for you, just keep them on hand when you get to the festival site. So when the guest LD first arrives to the festival site, the first step is to find the festival ME and go introduce yourself. Make sure you know that. So after that, go through that on-stage checklist together. Again, remember, start on the stage, then go to front of house. So coordinating with other departments is really important, especially when you're on stage. Anything that's getting placed on the stage floor, that's going to affect audio, that's going to affect, just how everything is. If there's dancers, if there's dancers with artists, you really have to make sure that you have a safe place for them to be. Once everything's been discussed on stage, the guest LD can head out to front of house with the festival ME and make sure to take note of the route between front of house and backstage, also known as not getting lost. The guest LD should request that the festival ME or one of their associates stay with them at front of house until the guest LD has gained control of the festival lighting system, and once they're ready to start their programming. And if it hasn't been offered yet, the guest LD should also just request a local production radio from the ME, just in case the ME has to leave front of house. So once you're all set up at front of house, just start going through your checklist and start focusing and programming, cloning, just everything you got to do. keep in mind, though, that depending on the situation, if there's lights that are still being set up on stage, like if there were a lot of things brought in that are getting placed on the floor and set up, you know, like that still might be getting done, depending on, you know, what happened the day before. Like there might still be troubleshooting happening, you know, there's this stuff. And so the LD needs to balance like getting their programming updates done with testing fixtures as they're coming online, as they're getting installed or fixed by the crew. So it's really important to communicate with the festival ME during this whole process, just so that everyone can work together efficiently. The guest LD, again, needs to stay positive, stay polite, even if you've got a lot of work to do in a short amount of time, 2 o'clock in the morning, like just try to stay positive, because everyone's in it together. Everyone's tired. We're all just trying to get it done. So being rude to the crew, that's a sure way to like lose respect, and it'll slow down the whole process. Like, yeah, don't do it. When the overnight programming session, when you're all done, just always remember to save multiple copies, save copies on USB drives, and just save. And don't forget to return the local production radio when you're done. So, yeah, in my experience as a guest LD, like these overnight programming sessions, like they can be very exhausting. Yeah, you're there all kinds of crazy hours, but it can also be a really magical time before the show starts. And not a lot of people get to experience that part of a festival because it's relatively peaceful and quiet on site. You know, only people there are people working or cleanup crews, and you know, just it's really chill. And sometimes, you know, you're there working until the sun comes up and you can't work anymore because now it's daylight. And I've gotten to see some really, really incredible sunrises over festival stages, like all over the world, like Spain, Chile, and South Korea were memorable. So yeah, it sounds really hard and terrible, but it's really not. Don't tell anybody. So one more conversation that the guest LD needs to have with the festival ME before the show is to make a plan for changeover, but from the front of house perspective. So is there a dedicated lighting console for the LD at front of house? Like, are they just going to come in and switch over? Or will the LD need to load their show file onto a shared console that somebody else has just been running, you know, swap over during changeover? So how can you plan to do this in a way that's not going to be startling to the live audience? Because the festival, they're right there the whole time. So how do you do that in a nice way? And then sometimes festivals will also have some requests for the guest LD during that changeover. There might be certain lights that need to be kept on for safety, like particularly the blinder lights on the front of a festival stage. Sometimes that's like your house lights, so you know you need to keep those on for safety. Sometimes there might be a sponsor logo like at the top above the stage, you know, something like that they want you to keep a light on. Ideally, anything like this would be something that the festival can control independently. That way, the guest LD can like just focus on their show and getting ready for their show. But that just isn't always the case, like depending on the situation. So just be prepared for that. Okay, getting ready for the show. So after the guest LD has rested up after the previous night's programming session, hopefully got a few hours of sleep at the hotel or whatever, he or she will likely arrive back on site sometime in the early evening on the night of their show. So once that changeover time on the schedule starts approaching, the guest LD should walk out to front of house a little bit early. Once the audience is in place and all the security checkpoints get busier, it can take significantly longer to get to front of house from backstage than it did like during that overnight programming session when nobody was there really, you know. You could just walk straight out there. Like you can't do that once there's like 50,000 people out there. So give yourself some extra time. The last thing you want to do is be trying to shove your way through masses of people eagerly awaiting the show to start, and you're like, yes, I know, it can't start till I get there. Yeah, it's really stressful. So just give yourself time to get out there early, and and hang out and watch the end of the show before yours if there's somebody else out there before your changeover. So yeah, and so you're out there getting there. So during that changeover time at front of house, like before the show starts, again, hopefully you've got like 20 minutes or so out there. So the guest LD do a quick test of your comm system to your follow spot operators if you're using them, and anyone else that you need to communicate with during the show over comms. So make sure they can hear you. Make sure you can hear them respond. If they have an issue during the show, like they need to be able to tell you. And then test the lighting system as discreetly as you can. Check that all the lights come on. Make sure you have control of the whole festival system. That includes things like haze and fog machines, like if you're using them. If there's any other show-specific tests, if you're running things with time code, like, work with your team and test things like that. And then have a quick meeting with the follow spot operators. Because in a festival situation, those follow spot operators have likely already been in position before you even went out to front of house. And you're very unlikely to have time to have a meeting with them face-to-face before your show starts. They won't have been there probably when you were there overnight. So your only meeting is going to be over the headset. And so, and if you're in a situation where your follow spot operators don't speak your same language, you will also be working with a translator. And ideally, I think if you're doing that, the translator should be standing next to you at front of house, because there can be a lot of like just nonverbal cues and things you're doing are like, look, it's just really helpful to just have that person like right with you. And so once you're in there and you're running the show, just try to stay calm, stay focused, just be observant. And again, if you've got that translator, if you're working with that, just make sure you call your follow spot cues just a little earlier. That way they have time to like, repeat the message and get everyone on standby. And that's one of those things that I always thought it would be really hard to do that, but in my experience, like calling follow spot cues with the translator, like just give yourself a little extra time. And it's a lot of fun. And the translators, they don't always get to do something like this. I mean, sometimes they do, but like this is usually really exciting for them. They're usually really happy to help, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So and the other things to stay aware of is just stay aware of the festival schedule. Like, know if there's other artists performing after you. If not, like if you're the last person that night, just is there a curfew for the end of the show? Just be aware of things like that. And also just remember to expect the unexpected. Like there might be a surprise guest artist. Another band that was playing earlier, somebody might come out and join your artist on stage. The guitarist might decide to play just an extra long solo that night, the artist might just start playing a song that wasn't even on the set list. Festivals can inspire just a lot of spontaneity on stage, and from the audience. It's a lot better to just try to go with the flow and just go with it rather than worry about like, show's not going exactly as we planned it. Like just stay present in the moment, just go with it. And stay safe, have fun. It's okay to dance a little bit. Don't be shy. Have fun. So when it's all over, whether you're the festival ME or the guest LD, just take a moment to ask yourself, did the audience clap? Did everyone have fun? Did most of the lights work? Could you see the artist? Is the artist happy? If you can say yes to like any of these, hopefully all of these, then that's really a job well done. So I hope that you all learned a lot more today about the roles of the festival ME and the guest LD and how they work together to bring a festival lighting system to life. And that's the webinar. And And I want to thank Carmen and Martin Lighting for the opportunity to present this today. If you have any more questions after we do the Q&A here, please feel free to email me. And I'm going to keep this slide up during Q&A, so it's just a little short glossary of terms here. Yeah. All right, Laura.
Okay, thank you so much. We do have a few questions. So the first one is, what if there is no guest LD traveling with an artist?
Okay, if there's no guest LD traveling with an artist. So sometimes that happens. So in that case, usually not the festival and me, because they usually have other responsibilities, but sometimes it is them. So them or one of their other production electricians, somebody else on the festival crew will be designated as like the festival LD. So they'll have somebody there on site who knows how to use the console, knows how to program, and they'll probably have a basic like festival busking show punt page, you know, stuff in the console that they can just play along with whoever's on stage if they didn't bring an LD. This happened to me one time when I was working at a festival, and that's how I ended up running lights for Public Enemy one time. All right.
Okay, the next question is asking, what if you lose power to the stage or front of house?
If you lose power, there's, you know, just try to stay calm. If you're the guest LD, just try to let the festival crew handle it because they know the system, they know how it's been set up. If you're the festival ME, hopefully you've got some things in the system out at front of house, like you've got some battery backups placed out there. Some consoles even have battery backups in the console, so just plan for that, so you might actually have some time. I was in a situation once where we lost power and the console stayed on for about 45 minutes. I was pretty impressed. That was the situation though. Everyone on stage did the right thing. They breakered off all the racks, they turned everything off, and so as soon as the building we were in regained power, they were ready to go.
All right, we have another question. What is the best practice for setup where one LD wants an MA console, another wants a HOG console, and a third wants an Avalite?
Oh, totally doable. I've worked on festivals where, as both, as the guest LD, as where we've had multiple types of consoles. So in that situation, it's fine. It's usually just a matter of having the right type of networking equipment out at front of house to just be able to swap between the consoles, whether it's an A/B switch or whether it's a network switch, and you're literally just plugging and unplugging cables at front of house. Because from that top of the snake at front of house downstream, like, it's not going to care too much what console's at front of house. It's just going to be which one's plugged in at any given point in time. So, I don't think it makes that too difficult. Yeah, Brad, if you have any notes about that, let us know. I think it doesn't matter that much.
Yeah, you covered it perfectly.
Okay, we have another question that just came in. What's your response to a severe weather event? Do you try to kill power to the fixtures or just get out of there?
In that case, it's really important to just defer to the festival, like whoever's the authority at the festival. Okay, so there might be stage managers that are going to have, they'll have a plan in place, and hopefully you'll have had some time over radio for somebody to, to say, like, okay, we need to turn these off. Okay, we're shutting this stuff down. So, if that call comes through, like, you just have to do what they say. But it's not the guest LD's responsibility to, like, make that call, right? Like, that's not your job. So somebody else will make that call. And if there's a situation with like high winds and stuff like that, like, outdoor festivals usually have somebody, a lot of times it'll be somebody with the rigging department that will be a designated person to watch that. there was a festival site I used to work at that was in a location that very frequently would have high winds, and we 24/7 we had somebody on wind watch, and that was their job. They were watching the wind speed, and they were watching weather reports. And you know, there was a day where we just had to pause load-in for about 3 hours and literally strap cases to the stage columns so they wouldn't blow off the stage, and just wait it out. And yeah, it's unfortunate when that happens, but you know, nature's going to do what nature's going to do, and safety is the most important thing. So.
Okay, we have another question. What if there isn't an ME or plot?
What if there isn't an ME? There should always be an ME. Like, you cannot do a festival without having an ME. Like, you need somebody at that festival who is responsible for managing that planning, that cable layout, the distribution. Like, yeah, it'd be very difficult to do a festival without one, so good luck.
Okay, we have another question. By default, do you cater for extra power in universe for ground packages or only on request?
I would say both, you know, like if anything's been requested, like absolutely have it, but things can also get added at the last minute. Like, yeah, I have a good story about that. Like there was a time I was working as a festival ME, and the headlining artist, you know, so they're the headliner, they added in an additional like dozen or so lights that like we were already at maximum capacity with power, and then they added in this gear last minute that morning of the show, and it showed up on site like, hey, we're adding these, where can we plug them in? And it was like, oh, okay, how are we gonna make this work? And basically I just ended up talking with the designer, and it was like, we're at capacity, and it was like, okay, well, when those new lights are on, these other lights here are going to be off. Like, we're not going to use them at the same time. So we just basically breakered off one section of lights while the new ones were running, and then after the first song, when they were never used again, we breakered those off and breakered the other ones back on, and we just made it work. And so, you know, that's just, you know, sometimes you just have to make it work. But it was also one of those situations where it would have been nice if we had had that extra power available. We had just made sure that we had a little bit more extra than we needed, just in case. And it can be harder sometimes whenever when you need extra power, you know, because that, depending on our situation. Like if you're on a generator and it's maxed out, like, I'm sorry, like it's hard. I'm figuring those things out. But control stuff, like, yeah, it's like if you can keep a spare universe or two open, just in case there's any surprises, like, definitely do it.
Okay, we have another question. For various console brands at front of house, is the preferred method to be the current guest LD taking direct control of the rig, or would merging the guest LD console to main resident console?
Let's see. I'm wondering if they're asking about merging show files. If that's the question about like doing a merge of stuff with the show file, again, that's kind of going to be at the programmer's discretion. I personally haven't really done it and try to avoid it just because things might change with the festival show, and things might change with my show, and it can be harder to do that ahead of time getting on site. And yeah, I feel like if there's a situation where you're going to do that, that's going to be something that the guest LD is like confident that they can do, that they want to do, and like leave it to them to do. Yeah, I don't know. I try to just keep my stuff separate, and I prefer it, like, especially for the headliner, if you have a console that's dedicated to you at front of house, that's really nice, because then you can get your stuff loaded onto it during changeover, and you're not waiting for somebody else to finish using a console. So.
Okay, we have a request asking if you can talk about one extreme fun situation you've had as an LD.
An extreme fun situation?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, I don't know.
Put me on the spot.
I don't know. It's all like as a guest I'll be, it's I don't know, it's just really fun when the crowd's really super into stuff. That's really good. Like when the crowd's just into it and you just have these moments where you can just watch the artist on stage and you know that like they're really having fun, they're really in the moment, and they're not worrying about technical stuff, they're not worrying about like whatever, they're just in the moment, and that's really cool. And sometimes those are like, you know, the big moments, the big last song of the night whenever there's like confetti going off and there's like all kinds of craziness going on and everybody's just like losing it. Like it's really fun. That can be really exciting. And then like the opposite of that is true as well. Like, you know, like my last show on a tour with an artist where like you get to that one ballad and there's literally a follow spot and 2 other lights on her, and that's it. That's like it. Pretty much everything else is just dark. That's it. She's just sitting on the edge of the stage, just like singing this really soft, sweet song, and like everyone, like thousands of people are just quiet. Just everybody's just in this moment, and it's really that kind of stuff is really magical. Like it's really really cool when that happens. And yeah, that's probably the most fun. Moments like that.
Okay, wonderful. It looks like that was the last question that came in. So, Robin, thank you so much for the presentation. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for attending and taking some time out of your day to spend the time with us. If you're interested in learning about upcoming sessions, you can go to pro.harman.com and see the full calendar. And as a reminder, this webinar was recorded, as all of them are, and you can find the links to those out on our YouTube channel. If you search under Harman Professional University, there's a full playlist there of all of the webinars. Thanks everyone, have a great day.